I've had solar for a full year and overall it's been pretty great, but I have some big problems. For example, one of these panels right here isn't producing any energy. Now it's interesting how I figured that out and what I'm gonna do to fix it, but we'll show you all of that. Plus, we've had so many other little challenges that have come up, some that are geographical with where I live and others that I didn't really expect, but we'll go through all of that. So if you've been thinking about getting solar for your house, stay tuned to the end. I'll show you my bills, my savings, all the data for 1 year of having solar and answer all your questions. I'm Ricky and this is Too Bit of Vinci. It's kind of crazy, but we've been in this house now for 2 years, which is pretty amazing. But that first year was brutal because our electric bills were astronomical. On average, we were paying $700 a month for electric and gas. And that's just a function of having two houses. We have a pool, we run all our business, all the computers and servers and stuff. And it's San Diego, some of the highest prices in the nation. On average, we're paying 45 cents per kilowatt hour, averaged out over the last 2 years, which is insane. So we knew we had to get solar, and it has helped for sure. But the problem is, I think we underestimated how much we would need. For example, we bought a second electric car. We have more rendering computers, we have a bigger team. Things have grown, and the solar system, I wish I had sized a little bit bigger, but we'll get into the details of that. First, let me show you what I've got here. I've got an array of 27 panels. Some of them are faced here, mostly facing the south, which is nice because the sun travels like this over the sky. But then I also have this group of 4 panels that catch more of the evening sun. So right now, you can't really see too much, but it is getting hit with a little bit of the sun from that mountain. And we'll get back to why this mountain over on the west is one of our biggest challenges. And finally, we have another 10 panels over here over the garage. So most people think about the solar panel because that's the part that you see, but honestly, any company that makes solar panels by the thousands and thousands is gonna make a pretty good panel, and most of them are really good. What you should probably spend most of your time thinking about is the inverter. This is a micro-inverter, and I have one of these under each of these panels out here. But your two choices are either micro-inverter, where each panel gets its own, or a string inverter, which is just one big inverter where all the panels tie into. Now there's pros and cons to both. And this is so important, I think it deserves its own analogy. So imagine you run a armored cash truck business where you go to shops and collect all their daily earnings in cash and deposit it at the bank. Well, that would be like the string inverter. If you had a big armored cash truck that goes from shop to shop to shop to shop and then goes to the bank, just one big truck. The problem with that is if you got a flat tire or you got robbed, it's all or nothing. You either have all the collections for the day or none of the collections, right? And it's the same with a string inverter. If the string inverter fails, you don't get any electricity production. Now, like I mentioned, one of these panels back here isn't working, but I barely even noticed because the other 26 are working just fine. Now, to go with that analogy, a microinverter is kind of like a bike courier, right? Imagine if instead of one armored truck, you sent out 27 bike couriers. Their only job is to go to one establishment, get the money, and take it to the bank. Now, if one of these bikes had a flat tire, or crashed, or got robbed, all you would lose is the money from that one individual establishment. And that's kind of how microinverters work. Now, string inverters have a couple of problems. If you just have a string inverter, shading and other considerations on one panel will affect the others. Like I mentioned, the panels back here don't get any sun until afternoon because the sun is facing this way. But if you had that in a string with other panels like this on a string inverter, you would actually lose panel production on all of them. With microinverters, all you're dealing with is one panel, so you don't have to worry about that. If any one panel goes bad or gets shading, it doesn't impact the others. Now, there are things you can do if you want to get a string inverter, like solar optimizers that are DC components that look a lot like this, but what they do is they isolate each panel and allow it so that if you have shading on one panel, it won't affect the others. But that isn't really something I love because then it takes away from the key benefit of the string inverter, which is cost. The big benefit of string inverters is they're typically cheaper, right? You would only need one, maybe two for a system this size instead of 27 microinverters, right? But if you have to go and get DC optimizers as well, that kind of eats into the savings. And that's always been kind of the thing. Better performance, longer lasting. Oh, did I mention longer lasting? These microinverters, because they do a lot less work, right? This is only having to deal with the power from one panel. So as a result, lower voltages, lower heat, these will last a lot longer. String inverters on average last around 10 years. I've heard they've gotten better, but that's a pretty decent average, 10 to 15. And these from Hoymiles, these microinverters and most others are warranted for over 25 years. This one has a 25-year warranty, and most of them will even last longer than that. So yes, a little more expensive, but longer lasting and better resiliency to failure are the real key benefits. But let's talk about the cost problem. Normally, like I mentioned, the string inverter is actually going to be your cheapest option. But the reason why I partner with Hoymiles, and I have Hoymiles microinverters in my entire house, every panel you see here is powered by Hoymiles inverters, is because I think they solve the one drawback, which has always been price. For example, this one that I've been holding this whole time, if you notice, has a lot of DC4 connectors on it. In fact, it has 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's because this microinverter can actually do the inverting for 4 panels. So now I don't need 1, 2, 3, 4 microinverters. I could do all 4 panels with just one of these. And that's actually what I have. In this group of 10, I have 2 4s and 1 2. And with those cost savings, if you got mostly 4x1 inverters like this for your system, you get all the benefits of a microinverter plus actually better performance in terms of price than a string inverter with optimizers. So this is kind of genius because you get all the pros with very few drawbacks. Okay, it's finally time to fix that bad panel that we have. Now, here's the Hoymiles app for data monitoring. From this view, 7.21 kilowatts, that doesn't tell you very much, right? That's what a string inverter would tell you. That's the total system output. Doesn't make a lot of sense from there. But if you look at the panel by panel section, we have a different story. So here you can see the panels warming up. And here we are about this time of day, all the panels are putting out pretty good power, except for one. And there it is. So that tells us it's this group of 10 and it's that top panel right over here. I think I see the problem, and it is exactly right here. So Pedro, the newest member of our team, who actually has experience with doing some solar installation in the past, is going to help us figure this out. Now is probably the right time to go turn off the entire grid. All right, just confirm that the panels aren't producing power. It's time to take this apart. I know not everyone's going to nerd out like me over the numbers and stuff, but you really should monitor your system from time to time because it really does give you a good indication of what's going on. Like if I hadn't been looking at that individual chart, I wouldn't have known that this wasn't hooked up correctly.
Okay, we're ready to lift it.
Ready to lift it? So what happened was this custom cable that the installers installed came off the MC4 connector. So we're gonna redo that and patch this back up. Always follow all the rules and know what you're doing. All right, now that we've gotten the panel all connected correctly, we identified the issue. Let's see if we're in good shape. I got the Hoymiles app open here. And look at that, all the panels are lighting up. Now you can see that the panels aren't at full output, and that's because today's a really cloudy day. You can kind of see just how variable the production is. Let's look at yesterday. Yesterday was a nice, beautiful day. As you can see, nice rise up, really cloudless days, and all the panels are producing. And really quickly, let's just talk about how bad this drop off is at night. You can see here in the morning, really nice smooth curve upward, right? All the way till noon or 11 o'clock or so. By about 2 o'clock, the drop off is dramatic, and we've come all the way down to under a kilowatt of energy all the way through the rest of the night. Our biggest problems here in San Diego, and for me in this house, is behind me. Right now, it's 3:30 in the afternoon, 3:30 in December, and the sun's already gone behind the hills. I live on a mountain, and the sun sets over that way, and as a result, I stop production. Look around. Look at these panels. None of them are lit up. They're all done for the day. And it's only 3:30 in the afternoon. And this is also something I had forecasted and I kind of predicted, but it got even worse than I thought. And there's a couple of reasons. First of all, here's a fun fact. Reno, Nevada is further west than San Diego. And why that matters is because your most expensive electricity is from 4 to 9 p.m. usually, if you have time of use metering. So that means that when you have the highest price of electricity, our sun has already gone down. When you couple that with the fact that in the winter the sun goes down earlier and daylight savings time, which is eating another hour out of our day, we are hurting because there's almost an hour more of sunshine in, let's say, San Francisco, just because of how much further west they are. Same time zone, but we're on one end of the time zone and they're on the other. So we have kind of a colliding series of factors, that hill, daylight savings time, and the fact that we're actually pretty far east in terms of how California's geography goes, but we're in the same time zone. So as a result, we should have sized our system up bigger. So the one drawback historically has been price, but Hoy Miles takes care of that, and it's why they get my highest recommendation. In fact, when I saw that a panel wasn't working, I immediately knew it was a wiring problem. I knew it wasn't the inverter. That's how much confidence I have. And that goes to another engineering principle. You have to have trust in your systems. If you can't trust your tape measure, you're not going to be able to build anything great. It's kind of the same thing. Hoy Miles makes such a great product. I knew it probably was an installation problem, and it was. But even if any one thing goes wrong, you've still got energy. Here's a look at every energy bill that I've gotten over 2 years. Now, as you can see, our energy usage is high, but it's not crazy. Anybody who lives in like Phoenix, Arizona, who's running air conditioning all the time knows these numbers are not high. But the crazy part is how much we pay per kilowatt hour, right? Our high was here about 1,700 kilowatt hours, and we paid over $670 for that power. That's pretty insane. And that's why solar in San Diego and California is just such a no-brainer. If you have high energy prices, obviously it makes sense. What's crazy is that we've paid $15,600 to our utility company in 2 years. That's insane. That is what I used to pay for 2 years of rent when I graduated from college. But here we are. And honestly, these prices are probably going to just go up and up from here. So this is the core use case for why solar makes sense. Now, if you already got solar before NEM3, like if you have NEM2 where the net energy metering is a little more favorable and they'll give you a credit for any energy that you produce in excess of what you need, then you're going to be golden. But for people who are buying solar now, you're going to be a little bit more screwed because they're not going to give you a very good favorable credit for any excess production. So for me, I produce a lot of power, obviously, from noon till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And that power they would credit me for later, and it kind of comes out in a wash. But now what they're going to do is they're going to pay you energy based on what they expect it to be. And it'll be, 20 cents on the dollar compared to how it used to be. It's not going to be as good. So that's why I think batteries are going to make way more sense going forward. And we'll do an entire video about batteries and what I went with in a future video. But for the solar component, it's really important to size your system appropriately. A couple of challenges that we've had, as you can see here, our gas bills are insane too. And our utility did a really horrible move. In January of last year, we had a really cold winter and they jacked up rates for natural gas because they knew people were going to use more gas for heating. And these are the kinds of nonsense and policies that you deal with when you're beholden to a monopoly. And that's what our energy company is. They're a monopoly. We don't have any choice, right? So we're moving away from natural gas to all electric and powering everything from the sun. So now we use an induction cooktop for most of our cooking, which means no more gas, all electric. That added to how much energy we use. And we have a heat pump clothes dryer. So now we don't use gas for that either. The last two things left are the gas furnace, which we still have, and a gas water heater, both of which we're going to change in 2024 when the money makes sense to do so, especially because both of our units are old and they need to be replaced. So these are all the factors that have changed in our lives, plus the growing team size, like we mentioned, more computers, and 2 electric cars. So when you plan out your system, be sure to be realistic about what you need and know that energy usage typically only goes up unless you're retiring and you're going to be downsizing, your kids are moving off and going to college. I think when my kids go off to college, our energy bills are going to come down pretty dramatically. But until then, you're probably only going to go up from here. So that matters. But at the same time, don't let a solar salesperson try to sell you this massive system that you might not need today. Like I mentioned, I'm going to add probably 4 kilowatts to my system in the next 2024 period because I just need more energy production, right? But you can always add on to your system. So my first advice has always been, always get a system you're comfortable with. When I got my house, I needed a new roof too. That was 20 or 30, that was 30 grand. So I had to pay 30 grand for the new roof before I could even go solar. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with solar because I had a leaky roof when I bought this house. I had to do it. But For me, it was pretty much worst case scenario. And that's all I could afford. But I knew eventually I would add on to my system, and I have, and I will in the future. So buy a system you're comfortable with. Never spend money you don't have or you're not comfortable spending. Always remember to keep that in mind. Whatever a solar salesperson tells you, do what makes sense for you. It's why I'm a big fan and I keep advocating for Hoymiles, and why many of you guys have checked out Hoymiles, visited our links over the years. This whole last year, Hoymiles has been a long-term sponsor of the channel, and there's a reason why. I'm just blown away by their service, their product, how well it works, their software, and everything else. It is a top-notch system, and like I mentioned, the value proposition is second to none. And one of the biggest questions you probably have is it worth it? What's the payback period, right? Well, we have not quite a year's worth of data because my system was approved to be turned on in April, and that actually reminds me of a really funny story I'll talk about in a second. I got screwed by my utility again, but that's partially my fault as well. We'll talk about that. But from April to November, which is 8 months, I produced 11,000 kilowatt hours of energy. Now, if I were to forecast that for 12 months, that would be roughly 16,500, which means at a rough energy price of 42 cents per kilowatt hour, I've saved $6,900. And for a $40,000 system, it would pay for itself in 5.7 years. Now, that's pretty great because like I've mentioned before, my old house, I had panels for 12 years. These systems will last 20, 30 years without any issue. And you can always get up and change stuff if you needed to in the future. But 5.7 years for me is a no-brainer in terms of payback period. And it's something that I'm happy to make because I know that I can produce energy, especially once I add the battery as well. Even if the power goes out, no matter what, I can run my business and my house and my life. And so for me, it's not just the money savings, it's the autonomy and the independence and self-reliance. But if you're curious about the payback period, that's how it has turned out for me. Now for that funny story that I mentioned, here's another huge mistake I made that you should not make. In March, I actually had my system ready. And we did a little test to turn it on, check everything out, and everything looked good. And my meter was turning backward. So I thought, cool. And my installer told me, all right, we're turning it back off. We're good. Whenever they email you that you're approved to be on net energy metering, you can flip the system back on. But I just got so excited. I wanted to see my system up and running. So in March, before I got the approval, I flipped it on. I thought, okay, if I produce energy during the day and they turn that off to zero, but any excess production or excess that I send to them, they can sell to my neighbors and for free and they won't credit me and that'll be okay. But it was much worse than that. They actually billed me for the part that I sent to them as my own usage. So instead of lowering my bill, I actually got charged for producing energy and sending it to them before my agreement was in place. Now, obviously, that's my fault, right? I mean, I didn't need to do that, but I just didn't think that they would go to that length. I thought they would just call it zero and say, thanks for the free energy, but we're not going to pay you for it. That would have been fair. But to bill me just like it was me using a kilowatt hour when I sent it to them, I didn't expect that. But don't make that mistake and just wait until you get your approvals before you turn on your system. One of the really cool things about solar is you can always add on to it. And in fact, we're gonna do a series showing you how to do that. We just bought another group of Hoymiles micro-inverters. And what we're gonna do actually, if you look over here, is we're gonna do a little bit of a covered patio and cover that section completely in solar. Right now, we've got some panels sitting there, they're not really plugged in, but we're gonna add on to our system just because, well, we need to. We still have an electric bill. Yes, we're saving about $400 a month, which is pretty great. $4,800 means that we'll pay the system off in about 6 years, which is pretty good, right? And after that's pure profit, especially as SDG&E keeps on raising their prices. But we do need to make more electricity because our goal is to be a carbon neutral company. We want to run this entire business completely on sunshine. So we are going to add to the system. But the really awesome part is how easy that is with microinverters like this. With the Hoymile system, we actually have 3 strings of panels and we could actually add on to one of them. This string right here can take more panels. And all we have to do is get that junction box, run a little conduit, add more panels, throw these on, and you're good to go. With string inverters, it's much more sensitive. You have to balance the voltages, you have to get the lines just right. It's a little harder to add on to. But with microinverters, it's kind of dead simple. And even if we didn't have enough electrical overhead, all we'd have to do is run a conduit to the new section, put in microinverters, put in panels, and we'd be good to go. These output 240 volt, and they just feed right into your main service panel. And that is why we're huge fans of micro-inverters. Now, there's a whole slew of variables if you have a DC battery and some other things. But for 90% of people, my vote, get micro-inverters like this from Hoymiles, especially if you can save money by getting the 4-in-1. And Hoymiles even has new 6-in-1 inverters to give you all the best benefits of both worlds, right? Best on cost and on performance. All right, so that is a really quick rundown of our solar system 1 year later. Happy to report everything's in good shape other than that one panel that came loose and we had to fix. But otherwise, so far, so good. And if you have any questions at all, don't be shy, reach out. We will get back to you. We have mad love for people who want to go solar. I think it's a great thing. Just hopefully you can learn from what the things that we didn't account for when you design your system. And yeah, until next week, guys, check out this video next. I'm YouTuber Da Vinci. Thank you so much for watching.